Slumpbuster.
Quiet on the set, make sure my mic is on. Eric, Dre, and Juju dog diving towards the pylon. Go for two, so damn rude, recognize authority. Spitting tips for fantasy, no way you're outscoring me. Bold predictions with conviction every single day. Sports addiction, no restriction, kicking game like Pele. He's the greatest, what's the basis? Pick an athlete, let's debate this game. Outrageous trading places, sudden death, take 10 paces. Turn and shoot, boys the truth, Mamba mentality. Future greats take their place, dreams become reality. Low and outside, knocked it out the park. Your boy discovered fire like a rock with a spark. Refs acting like Neanderthals. Phantom flags, nothing calls. Heartbreak losses, tragic falls. Every week discuss it all. Settle in, listen up. Free your time like Andrew Luck. Show's about to start. I suggest you buckle up.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Slumpbuster, episode 30. Our special guest this week, coming to you live, Deji from the Baseball Connection podcast. Welcome into the Slumpbuster. Woo.
Thanks for having me. Great to be on.
We're happy to have you. Another awesome guest, and we're inching closer. Spring training's already started up. I think we've had like about 20 Astros players hit by baseball. So what do you put that over-under line as far as players hit? Do you think top that triple-digit mark before spring training ends? Because we're on pace to.
Maybe not quite triple digits, but I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. I mean, I've seen some pitchers get pretty clever with it, where they'll throw a breaking ball and they'll hit the batter to make it seem like it wasn't intentional, but we all know what they're trying to do, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon, especially when the regular season rolls around.
A couple weeks ago, I know, what's his name? I keep forgetting the Miami Marlins pitcher. Urias, I believe, was
Urena.
Yeah, the one that nailed another one of them last week. And that one, no hiding what he was trying to do. Anytime you drill him in the ribs with the fastball, it's like, pretty obvious here.
I mean, Urena is known for that, though. I mean, if you go back a couple years when he was doing it to Ronald Acuna Jr., he was the one in the middle of that whole scuffle when I think it was Acuna's rookie year when he was hitting home runs left and right, and Urena just went up there and drilled him because he couldn't get him out. And now you see him doing it in a spring training game. Not what you want to see, but I can't say I didn't expect it for the Astros.
Isn't it funny that people were so against baseball policing itself for years with the hit by pitches, and now this year there's just been a ton of fans coming out of the woodwork, a ton of baseball experts saying, yeah, you should drill them a little bit. Manfred didn't punish them, so I mean, might as well take it out on them a little bit. Pretty
much. And what we've seen this year, at least with the whole fallout of this sign stealing scandal, is that the players are mad. They're livid. We never saw this with steroids back in the day. We didn't see as much of an outcry from other players around the league as we're seeing now. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that social media is more of a thing now. Everyone has a voice, but we're seeing a lot more players speak out against Rob Manfred, against baseball, because they feel, Cody Bellinger, he says he feels like he was cheated out of the World Series. Aaron Judge says that he feels like Altuve's MVP wasn't earned anymore. Those are some pretty strong statements. So I think it's because we're able to hear more from players that it seems a little louder, but it's kind of hard to place it in relation to the steroid era back then.
Yeah, no, I could definitely understand that. So, all right, well, this is your first appearance on our show. We welcome you in with open arms, Deji. So tell us, Baseball Connection podcast, how's the podcasting life been treating you so far to this point?
It's been pretty good. I enjoy it. It's a daily baseball show. We'll talk about anything baseball related. Sometimes we'll even have guests on there. I say we, but it's really just me. I've had a number of guests, like minor leaguers. I've had college World Series champions. I had first round draft picks on there, and just some friends just get on there and kind of talk casually like this. But it's good. We'll have a new episode every single day, 7 days a week, something baseball related. If it's not the last night's games or something, it's going to be something in the news baseball related, but we're there every single day.
That's pretty impressive. Not only soloing it, because obviously I know how much of a bitch editing is, filming is, putting out decent covers to, attract people whenever they come across your channel. So all that combined, you're doing that by yourself. And then obviously just keeping up with it daily, especially when we hit regular season, 162 games scheduled. It's not the easiest in the world to cover. Remember back in my high school days, I definitely was on the line of watching over 100 plus baseball games in a year. Admittedly, maybe it's also because my Giants suck this year, but it's a grind to make it through those dog days of summer, that's for sure. So you mentioned you're a Red Sox fan. So, they're the second shoe to drop in this scandal. What do you think's coming down their way?
Yeah, we thought we would see the results of that investigation by now. I think it was around January or so when Major League Baseball said that they were going to investigate the Red Sox. We're almost 2 months later now. We haven't heard anything. And that leads me to believe that there isn't going to be a whole lot, because I feel like if there are going to be some pretty serious suspensions, we may have already heard about it before they had a new manager, have their hands on the team, and things get going with games in spring training. But everything I've heard coming out of Red Sox camp, for what it's worth, JD Martinez has said they're going to do their investigation. They're going to find that nothing was happening. Everything I've heard makes me believe that it was no more than gamesmanship, which is basically stealing signs from second base, which is something every baseball player does, and relaying it, amongst your teammates through the dugout. But using the video room, that's obviously a no-go zone, and I would be surprised if the Red Sox were caught doing that. But then again, who am I? I'm not part of the investigation, so I'm just going to have to wait and see like everyone else.
Well, it definitely is suspicious when you have like characters like Alex Cora, who, according to the testimonies of the Astros players, he was one of the main figureheads in the whole initial cheating scandal, and he was fired pretty quick. Like the Red Sox didn't even hesitate as soon as like this investigation started turned their way. Like Alex Cora, bye guy. Quick turnaround there.
That was interesting because I saw an interview that Cora did last summer. It was when the Red Sox went to London to play the Yankees, and it was very suspicious in hindsight. You look at it, and it was Alex Cora talking about Carlos Beltran. He's like, yeah, that's a good Yankees ball club over there. They have Carlos Beltran, and he like winks. It's like this really weird suggestion. It's like at the time, no one really knew what he was talking about, but now when you look at it, like, oh wow, like Cora and Beltran both were on the Astros at the same time. They were both masterminds behind the whole sign stealing scandal. Okay, it kind of all makes sense now. I really don't know. I mean, it's going to be tough. I don't know what's going to come out of this investigation for the Red Sox. Obviously, if they cheated, they should be punished. It is what it is. But until that investigation comes out, I'm just going to wait like everyone else.
Okay, the next Red Sox question I got, of course, to ask you about is Mookie Betts, no longer a Red Sox. Like, how are you dealing with that one? Have you gone through grief therapy to get over it? I mean,
man, the Mookie trade was a tough one, but I understand it. So there's like a couple different camps of Red Sox fans. There's a few. There's like the camp of Red Sox fans that believe, ownership is cheap. Let's not buy a single ticket ever again. John Henry is a scumbag, whatnot. There's the other camp of Red Sox fans that believe like, yeah, Mookie was asking for way too much money. He's not worth it anyway. The Red Sox stood no chance to re-sign him for what he was asking for. It's good that we got the prospects back in return. Then there's the camp of Red Sox fans that's kind of in the middle, which is kind of where I am. It's like, okay, Mookie's asking for a lot of money. Let's trade him now so that we can get a lot of prospects in return. He's going to be a free agent. Then let's re-sign him in free agency because all he's going to need is money then. So therefore, we'll have the prospects and then we'll have Mookie back. And obviously that's a bit of a pipe dream. It's happened before. If you look at what the Yankees did with Aroldis Chapman in 2016, that's exactly what they did. They got Gleyber Torres in that deal. They shipped off Chapman to the Cubs, who were trying to break a curse, and they got Gleyber Torres as the headline in that deal. And then that same winter, they throw all this money at Chapman, and now they basically eat their cake and have it too. And now look, a couple years later, they have both those guys under contract. It's pretty crazy.
Well, it definitely took a lot of confidence from the Yankees to be able to make that move and then trust that Chapman would come back to them in the free agent market because, the free agent market's like, wow, people are just throwing out money like crazy. They've kind of took a step back, at least the last couple of years. Obviously, there was a hesitance to sign guys like Astros pitcher a couple years ago.
Verlander?
No.
Dallas Keuchel.
Dallas Keuchel,
Keuchel.
Was just sitting on there up until I believe it was June. He got signed
after the draft. Yep. And Craig
by
Kimbrell as well.
Mm-hmm. So you have these guys who are top tier level free agents that just sat there for a while just because baseball ownership is starting to rear back on handing out these 10-year deals. And there's no question there hasn't been a great track record of success, obviously. Can you name probably the most successful 10-year deal? I would say Alex Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Because they won a title.
That's one that comes to mind. The A-Rod deal comes to mind. 10 years, man. I can think of some that are 7 or 8, but 10, that's tough. And honestly, I have, an opinion on that. So essentially what happened a couple years ago was the culmination of sabermetrics and analytics showing us that it makes no sense to pay players for what they've done. It only makes sense to pay players for what they're projected to do. So now we have all this data telling us that players on the wrong side of 30 years old tend to decline very quickly. So it doesn't really make sense to give a player like Albert Pujols, for example, who got a 10-year deal when he was 32 years old. It makes no sense to do that. That's probably like that contract is probably like the worst offender if you're looking at examples. So essentially what's been happening is that players are getting the short end of the stick based on the way arbitration is set up, is that you come up to the big leagues, you do your 3 years on that rookie deal, then 3 years of arbitration, then you're a free agent. Well, most guys aren't getting to the bigs until when they're 22, 23, maybe even 24.
Mm-hmm.
So, by that calculation, you're not hitting free agency until you're 28, 29, 30. So basically you're getting a player for their best years when they're only being paid, on the rookie deal or arbitration. And when they now want to get paid and they want to cash in, now we're telling them they're too old. And I think the old system worked back when a lot of guys were juicing. When guys were on PEDs, that would basically extend their prime. It wasn't uncommon to see guys still in their prime well into their mid-30s. But now you don't see that very often anymore. You see guys like Miguel Cabrera, you see guys like Albert Pujols just absolutely fall off a cliff once they hit their 30s. So I think what needs to happen to fix that, if players want to get their money back, essentially, is you need to restructure the CBA such that players can hit arbitration earlier. Maybe what that means is that you start that service time clock day one in the minors instead of day one in the majors, so that, when you're ready, that minor league service time is still counting against you so you can get paid right away.
I completely agree. I think that is a big change that baseball needs to make. And I think it would add a little bit more excitement, the ability to see players hit that open market when they're still really in their prime. So when teams do sign them, they don't just, like you say, waste away before everyone's eyes while they're getting paid these exorbitant amounts of money. Let's actually feed in my co-host here, Dre, a little bit. So he's an Angels fan. So give him hope on why this Mike Trout 10-year deal is going to be the first that's actually going to work.
Ooh. All right, I'll try my best. Mike Trout's I'll try. I'm just personally not a fan of decade-long deals. I don't care who you are. But for Mike Trout, he's the best player in baseball. He's arguably the best player of all time, although I'm not willing to give him that title over Barry Bonds. But what you do know is that you're going to get at least 5 years. You're getting at least 5 more years of just MVP level production. He will start to slow down eventually. And when he does, the hope is that, the front end of that contract is what makes up for the value of it. He's being paid an average of, I think, 35 or 36 million a year, which is a steal for his value. He didn't even play the whole season last year and he won the MVP. Mike Trout has been first or second in the MVP voting every full year in the big leagues except one, I think. And that 1 year was just because he was hurt. He's the best player we've ever seen. So as an Angels fan, you don't want to see him in any other uniform. It just kind of sucks that he's only been in the postseason once, I believe. I would like to see Mike Trout play more postseason games.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with just the team around him, right? Mike Trout obviously is, of this generation, possibly the best baseball player there is. But, of course, he can only do so much by himself, right? And so the team around him, the ability of the Angels to be able to provide that talent to get the entire team to the postseason seems to be lacking. Now, like you said, I'm glad that we've got Mike Trout, and I'm glad that he's probably going to be an Angels for life, but it does come at the cost of, very limited postseason success.
Yeah, and it's tough because the Angels have shown that they're willing to spend money. They've just been super unlucky. Pujols, CJ Wilson, Josh Hamilton, all these guys, they signed to huge deals as soon as they got to Anaheim. Okay, Pujols, you got 2 or 3 good years. But Josh Hamilton, what happened to him? I don't even know. CJ Wilson gave you 1 year, and that was it. You guys signed Rendon, this Austin, which I really like. I'm a huge Tony Two Bags fan. I think he's going to do special things. I do want to see the Angels unleash Shohei Ohtani because I've said on my podcast several times that this kid is something special, that they need to kind of take the training wheels off of him because even his rookie year, I understand he was young, 23 or whatever, but they're only pitching him once a week. And then with the bat, they were not letting him hit the day before his starts or the day after. So he was only in the lineup 3 times a week. It's this dude still hit I don't know how many home runs he hit and he won the rookie of the year. I would like to see more consistent playing time for Shohei Ohtani, especially now that he's healthy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Angels have just had some bad luck in my opinion.
All right. Well, that does give me a little bit of hope.
That Rendon signing, that's going to pay off big. Just having that lineup support for Mike Trout, having someone right behind him that can, put in the bleachers. Albert Pujols, he's tailing off, but he's still good for maybe about 20 home runs, give or take. And then Shohei, I think is one of the most exciting players in baseball these days. We haven't seen anything quite like him because he is just as good of a pitcher as he is a hitter. And he's a problem, man, whether he's in the lineup, whether he's on the mound. I think, though, he's not able to pitch until middle point of this year, right? He's with the injury, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So he's done with his rehab, but they need to get him back into game shape and on the mound. I think they're saying May or June. Knowing the Angels, they'll probably wait until June because they treat this guy with like gloves. I mean, I understand it, but yeah, he's probably not going to be on the mound until about June.
Yeah, I mean, he's a huge financial investment, and definitely we know that Japanese-born baseball players, they're not only exciting to watch from, our standpoint as Americans, but Ichiro, his fans in Japan, the following, like I used to go to spring trainings with my dad, and the amount of Japanese reporters that would be at their stadium out there in Kiora was insane. Like he just had packs of people just following him each and every day, and makes sense. Obviously, he's one of the greatest of all time, Ichiro Suzuki. One of my favorite players actually growing up in this last generation. Okay, so you gave Aundre hope on the Angels. Try and give me some hope with the Giants, man. I mean, I feel like it's going to be a rough one.
Oh, man. I don't think there's any hope. I mean, you guys re-signed some fan favorites. And when you do that, that's how you know there isn't any hope. Because your front office is just, I mean, it's Pablo Sandoval. He's back. Hunter Pence is back. Basically, what I'm seeing is that Farhan Zaidi in the front office, like, we know this is a rebuilding year. We just lost Bochy. We lost Boch. So we need the fans to come watch us somehow. Well, okay, we'll bring back Panda. We'll bring back Hunter Pence. I mean, besides that, I have no idea. I mean, Buster Posey's old. Brandon Bell's still pretty good. Brandon Crawford's still pretty good. Longoria's, getting to the end of his career. But I'm sorry. In that NL West, we all know it's the Dodgers. And that NL wild card is always a dogfight every single year.
Yeah, it's going to make me absolutely sick to see Mason Saunders pitch against us every 5 days.
Mason Saunders, yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a rough one because, like you said, like these guys, like their prime was 2012, and thank God they won us a World Series in 2012. But Pence, Posey's home run production has gone down practically every single year since his MVP season. There isn't a lot to love. I do appreciate Farhan. I do think that he's a very smart GM because some of the moves he was making last year when the Giants were kind of a fringe wild card team, they're hanging on up until about August, and then things just fell off the cliff for them. And he was making those Kevin Pillar just randomly pulls him out of nowhere, puts up some decent numbers for us. Yastrzemski's grandkid out here has 20 plus home runs, and somehow, some way they were competing, but our ballpark is so limiting. So like power hitters, they just say no. That's one of the big things that prevented Bryce Harper from wanting to sign the dotted line with us. Bryce Harper, that's an interesting name to talk about. So second year out there in Philly was predicted to do a lot of big things last year. Do you think we can expect a bounce back season from them?
I think we can, but cautiously optimistic. The lineup is good. Harper was better than I anticipated he would be last year. I had been pretty tough on him going to last season because just the expectations are so high of the former MVP. But their biggest area of improvement is their pitching staff. They need to figure out what's going on with that. And the only thing that they really done, I guess, in that regard, the big thing is that Aaron Nola is their ace, but they have to figure out if they're going to go with Nick Pivetta or I think it's Zach Eflin. I'm trying to remember who their fifth starter is going to be. But they need to round out the back of that rotation. They got Didi Gregorius. He's going to play shortstop for them. I really like that signing. He's going to add some pop to their lineup. Kutch is coming back, but that pitching staff is going to be their Achilles heel. I do think there's some upside for them. I think they were like right around 500 last year, but their division is tough, so I still have them missing the playoffs this year. But I do think they'll finish above 500.
Anytime you attach a huge number to your salary like that, of course, the expectations are going to jump up exponentially. But I mean, the thing about it, and just going back to the free agent discussion a little bit, just expecting one person to carry your whole team is not something that really fits in baseball when you have two different sides of the ball with the pitching staff, as you mentioned, that has been a little bit of a weak spot for the Phillies. And the lineup could only carry them so much. I mean, everyone could hit the ball well right now in baseball with the juice balls era, whether you believe in that or not. It's a lot of luck element. So generally, depending on your team to outswing the other team probably isn't necessarily the way to go. Building up a strong pitching staff, I think, definitely does have a lot of merit. You look at the teams that were in it last year. I mean, particularly the Nationals with a rotation with Strasburg, Scherzer, they were just getting it done. Audubon Sanchez, all these guys. And then, of course, the Dodgers, who are one of the best teams in baseball. I mean, their pitching staff with Bueller, Kershaw, all them has been solid. I think people are underrating losing Ryu. I mean, he's coming off a career year. Losing him to Toronto, I do think is going to be a huge hit on their pitching staff as a whole. But with that said, we're all projecting a Yankees-Dodgers World Series, aren't we?
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. The first thing I will say is that you mentioned Ryu. That was a surprising move to me because, I mean, if we rewind like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, the Blue Jays weren't on anyone's radar for contending, and then all of a sudden they go out and make a big free agent splash. I think the thing with Ryu is that everyone knows he's good. They're just worried about his durability. Last year was the first time in at least maybe 4 years that he was really healthy, like actually healthy for the full year. But on your other point about Yankees, Dodgers, I think that's a very good point because you talk about the impact of one player, what one player can do or what they can't do in baseball. The Yankees and Dodgers, talking Garrett Cole and Mookie Betts respectively, they make huge splashes. MVP, Cy Young caliber players. Those are the kinds of teams where one player can make a big difference. You're looking for the player that can put you over the top. You're taking a Dodgers team that is already a National League pennant winning team. Mookie Betts is only going to make you better. That little extra amount of WAR, wins above replacement, whatever, is what is going to put you over the top. Garrett Cole, although the Yankees have suffered some pretty bad injuries already this spring, he's the kind of guy that can put them over the top when they're fully healthy.
Yeah, the Yankees probably have the most expensive DL, IR, what do you want to call it, currently in the league. I mean, with Stanton down again, it's kind of ridiculous how many injuries Stanton has faced over the last couple years. I think he only played 17 games last season, and now he has that calf strain. You have Aaron Judge, obviously he's dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury. They're kind of downplaying it at this point. But then you lose Severino in the rotation. Obviously, we know Tanaka doesn't have the cleanest bill of health. CC's gone. So now their rotation is a little bit more suspect, that you hope that Cole could keep it together at the top, doesn't get his money, and then just starts to tail off. I mean, hard to lose out on everything when you can't generate a 95 plus mile per hour fastball, but we have seen it before when people get that big contract, especially now that he is under a spotlight that he's never really been in. I mean, yes, being in the World Series is like a big pressure situation, but now he has to deal with New York media, which a lot of people, when they first step into a Yankees uniform, aren't necessarily prepared for.
Absolutely. But I think Garrett Cole's the kind of guy that's tough as nails. I don't think the New York media is going to bother him because he's good and he knows he's good. He can pitch against anyone. I mean, that dude, like as a Red Sox fan, like that was one signing that just scared me. I'm like, you're trying to downplay, like, oh, you can nitpick at other players, their flaws and everything. I can't really nitpick anything about Garrett Cole. He's durable. He throws gas. He eats innings. He's a strikeout pitcher. He has a low ERA. It's just like everything you could look for in a pitcher. And congrats to the Yankees for signing him.
So how long of a rebuild do you think it is going to be for the Red Sox, though, when you do have the Yankees, just the evil empire in your division? Because we've seen them hit the reset button before when they traded away like Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford, Josh Beckett. When was that, like 2013? And then a couple years later, they're in the World Series, obviously. So do you think this could be another situation where they do like a 3-5 year turnaround? Or do you think we're in for a long haul rebuild with the Red Sox?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's going to be long. So like you mentioned that Gonzo and Beckett Crawford salary dump they did. I think they did that in, let's say 2012. They won the World Series in 2013. The Red Sox have been known to just kind of flip the switch. They go on this weird thing where they'll win the AL East. They'll go like last place, win the AL East, last place. It's super weird. So with that being said, I don't think this rebuild is going to take long because whenever you have the kind of money and resources they have, all they are is just a couple good signings away in their pitching staff or whatnot, their bullpen especially. And their bullpen, losing Kimbrel has hurt us a lot. But all they are is a couple good signings away from being right back into it. And we're talking about a team that won the World Series in 2013 and in 2018, and the Yankees haven't won a World Series in over a decade. There's been a lot of talk about the Yankees' evil empire over the last few years because they've been really good on paper. But I guess losing to a cheating Astros team didn't really help the case. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought of, obviously they would not fire Joe Girardi had they not lost that series. When they were in New York, they were dominating the Houston Astros, and just playing in Minute Maid Park just seemed to turn things around. So I don't know. It is a huge question mark, but I mean, the Yankees are always going to be up there. They're always going to be amongst the top competing teams. And what's intrigued me is they've done it a different way. So the Garrett Cole signing was their first major signing in a few years, quite some time. Like they haven't really made any big splashes on the free agent market. Of course, acquiring Stanton through the trade market was one of their signature marquee moves, but they've done a fantastic job of player development the last couple of years. When you look at, like you said, they made that trade that got him Gleyber Torres. They went out there and got, of course, Aaron Judge, and have developed him into a star. I do give it to the Yankees that they're actually bringing in some farm-grown talent, as they say, and making them into their marquee names. I mean, that's what they did when in the late 90s when they brought on guys like, of course, Derek Jeter, Rivera, Posada, all the, marquee Hall of Famers that we know and love today. So let's get into some kind of like headlines of the last couple of weeks. So Dre and I have talked about these headlines so far. So kind of like pick your brain and see what you think about them. One that we talked about just last week that was a notable thing was obviously Giants fan here. So seeing the 2010 World Series was a pinnacle point in like my childhood as a baseball fan. And Aubrey Huff was a big part of that. He led the team in home runs that year. And then when it's come time, obviously, for this reunion here 10 years later, the Giants said no. Our position on it was, or at least my position was more so, I don't think they should have done it or should have disinvited him so openly, because I think you made it a bigger headline doing that than just letting him step on stage, tip his hat, and that be that. What are your kind of thoughts on it?
Yeah. So with the whole Aubrey Huff thing, I knew it was a thing, but once this, being disinvited from the reunion kind of circulated, I was like, wow, this is actually becoming a public story, because I follow Aubrey Huff on Twitter. So I had just like organically seen his tweets over the years. And I realized over the last year or so, I'm like, this dude is very outspoken. I'm like, that's fine. You speak your mind. But over time, I'm like, this is probably like stuff that people didn't know when they cheered for him as a fan. I wonder if people would rethink their stance on supporting him if they knew that he was so outspoken about certain things. But as far as like the Giants disinviting him, I don't really have a problem with it. I think that's their prerogative. They have an image to keep up, because I think that if they did invite him, there are always going to be people who have something to say. So people we're going to attack the Giants, say, how dare you allow Aubrey Huff come back? How dare make a stance? Do you not respect minorities, women, or whatever marginalized group he may have attacked through his tweets? So I think the Giants were kind of taking a more defensive approach by trying to absolve themselves, because this is also a team that had a bit of a PR nightmare last year with their, I believe it was their CEO or the owner getting in the news for an altercation with his wife. So that wasn't a good look for them then either.
Well, Aubrey definitely used that, like in his statement this past week when he tweeted out, like, I think it's kind of hypocritical to get disinvited by a man that was seen with his own issues on recorded camera just last year. But I do think, like I said, I feel like it was more of a detrimental move to them, because, yeah, he would have been on stage and you would have had some people say, like, look, they allowed this guy to come here. But my thought on it was, unless he's just going to get on the microphone and just yell mega a bunch of times into the microphone, what are you really worried about? The thing about baseball is obviously you have pitchers from Korea. You have first baseman for the Dominican Republic. You have players that just come out of Cali, New York, all these random places. Culturally, there's going to be some disagreements. And yes, maybe he's more outspoken, as you mentioned on Twitter. But I mean, for the most part, you go down a major league roster, I'm sure you're not going to agree with the opinions of all 25 guys, or 26 now. I forgot about the extra addition there. So, I mean, that's more or less my thought. Okay, so that's a quick take on Aubrey Huff then. What about Mason Saunders? Do you think it's a smart move for a guy that just got paid $85 million on a 5-year deal be out there jumping into a rodeo ring on his off time?
I thought that was hilarious. So Madison Bumgarner, he's just a country boy at heart. The picture, so we don't know the full details, how long he's been doing this, if he's done it since then. But all we know is that the picture that circulated of him on that horse in the rodeo ring was about 2 weeks before he agreed to the $85 million deal with the D-backs. But what we do know is that Mad Bum has been in trouble in the past for breaking the terms of his contract when he got hurt riding an ATV. I think it was in Colorado a couple years ago, and that cost him a huge chunk of his season. He should be thankful that he's, as good as he is, that he was, because usually for people like that, like that's kind of the death knell to your career. You're not going to see big money after that, but he remade himself. He's still a good pitcher, and he was able to get $85 million after that. But I thought it was hilarious seeing that rodeo thing. And I was just like, yeah, you can't take the country out of this boy, man. He's a country boy at heart. He just happens to have great left arm. They can throw baseballs, but he has other passions as well. And I guess that's good for him. As long as he stays, in good faith with his ball club, I have no problem with it.
Exactly. Crashing ATVs, riding bulls, getting in fights with Yasiel Puig. The guy's just all over the place. I mean, who would you like to see Madison Bumgarner fight if it happened? Because it's going to happen some point this season. Someone's going to take him deep.
Yeah, I mean, Puig was a good one. That would have been a good, like a real fight. Puig is a good matchup for him. Muncy, he got in a little bit of a yelling match with Muncy last year. I think I might actually take Mad Bum in that fight against Max Muncy. Who else would give him a run for his money that's similarly sized?
He's a big guy. I mean,
he's a big guy.
What is he, like 6'5"?
He's got to be like 6'5", yeah. 6'4", 6'5", sturdy. That's maybe a former teammate of his, Hunter Strickland. He's also a big dude.
Yeah, who do you think won that fight a few years back? Hunter Strickland or Bryce Harper? Who do you think got the better there? Because I do think that people underrate Strickland got some decent blows in himself.
Yeah, Honestly, I think Strickland won that fight if I had to choose one, because when you miss your throw with your helmet by that much, that's a DQ. You're disqualified. I don't know how Bryce missed that badly on that throw.
What was the probably nastiest fight you think you've seen in the last few years, Deji?
The nastiest one I've ever seen, this was, I believe, 2010, Cardinals-Reds. It was between Yadier Molina and Brandon Phillips, and some guys actually lost their careers over that. Someone got like a cleat to the eye or something and had to stop playing. That one's really bad. And then last year, Amir Garrett on the Reds. Again, the Cincinnati Reds. Amir Garrett, I forget who the opponent was, but he wanted all the smoke on that one. He was taunting the opposing dugout, walking over there, and then his manager, Brian Price, got into it. So, yeah, both those Reds brawls, the one in 2019 and I think it was 2010, Brandon Phillips and Yadier Molina in a bench-clearing brawl in Cincinnati, that was really bad.
One of my favorite, and it's not necessarily even a great fight. It was just more so like the highlight of the fight was, you remember Nigel Morgan?
Oh my goodness. Are you talking about the one in Florida?
Yeah, where he just gets clotheslined.
Yeah.
Done, knocked out like by I think it was the first baseman that nailed him.
Yeah, Tony Plush, man. Yeah, Nigel Morgan, that dude was a character.
Let's see.
Good times.
How would you grade the Nolan Ryan? Was it Nolan Ryan? God, I'm forgetting that. Why am I spacing?
It was it was the I know who you're
White
talking
Sox.
about. The White Sox manager,
Robin Ventura, right?
Robin Ventura, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My dad would say if I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He's a big time Nolan Ryan fan.
Yeah. That was old school when they like let them fight.
Just gets him in a headlock. Just.
Yeah, I mean, Nolan Ryan, that was just a good beatdown. He really got the best of him on that one for sure.
Okay, well, tell me, who do you think is going to be the biggest surprise team this year? Because baseball always has one come out of nowhere, like the Twins, like with their offense last year was one of the more explosive teams. Who are you kind of picking as your sleeper pick?
Kind of a sleeper, but I think it's unfair to put them in a sleeper because they've always been low-key good. But the Oakland A's. I'm going to say that the Oakland A's will win the AL West this year. I think they will. This team won 97 games last year. It's like them and the Rays who always win like 95-plus games, but no one ever knows it. But I think the Oakland A's will make a run at it. The thing is, though, they don't have what it takes to go deep into the playoffs. They're a regular season team. Just the way, you can't use like openers and get cute with it over like a 7-game series, right? You need that power arm that's going to eat up innings for you on game 1 and then come back in like game 4 or something like that. That's where their downfall would be in a team like the Rays, for example. But I think a regular season, I can see the A's winning the AL West.
What did you think of the postseason expansion idea? The pick your opponent format? What are kind of like your thoughts on that? Because I don't completely hate it. I don't want to dismiss it out the gate because I do think that there is some merit to trying to make baseball a little bit more interesting. But at the same time, obviously, let's face it, there's a lot of hardliners in baseball that like can't change a thing. It has to maintain the same game 100%. We didn't even want to implement replay for years just because we thought it was going to be a big issue. And you can still make your arguments like, yeah, replay, I don't know, it slows down the game, which is another big argument in baseball. But slowing down the game to get it right, I think more people will be pissed off with a wrong call than just having to wait an extra minute. They can slow that process down a little bit. I think we see enough camera angles to where we should know if play is right or wrong within 60 seconds in my mind. But playoff expansion, 7 teams, pick your opponent. Thoughts?
Yeah, I like it. Yes, the logistics are going to be tough. Some people have expressed a concern that if you're the number 1 seed, let's say there's 7 teams in each league, you're the number 1 seed, you get that bye. Well, if you get that bye and they do a media day before that first wild card game, then they do that. And then the real wild card game, you obviously get your bye. It's too many days off. Whereas at that time of year with baseball, you're in a rhythm and you need to keep playing. You can't afford to take 5, 6, 7 days off before your ALDS series or NLDS series. Now your number 1 seed's at a disadvantage because their hitters haven't seen live pitching in the week. So I understand the logistical nightmare that could be. However, on paper, the concept of a selection Sunday in baseball, I love it because I think that's just going to bring more intensity to the September baseball because there's way more at stake. And also, you're not going to have basically half the league and their fan bases check out in August when NFL training camp starts up because now there's just so much more opportunity to make the playoffs. Usually it's like after the All-Star break, you see about, 15 teams or so, about half the league, their fan bases start to kind of like, okay, next year, right after the All-Star break, that's in July. But now if you do this and you have 7 teams per league making the playoffs, that's obviously going to keep more engagement throughout the entire regular season for all 162. And at the same time, when you're able to choose your opponent, that's just a wrinkle of excitement with the drama and the storylines that can be created. Oh, this team want to play this team or they didn't want to play them. I just think that's great drama for baseball, but they do have to kind of iron out the logistics of it so that it's not that the number one seed's at a disadvantage because they've been on the shelf for a week.
Yeah, that was my concern on it too, because you're right. Baseball is so rhythm based. Remember the Rockies in 2007 when they won their 27 straight series or whatever it was? They were rolling and then they had to take a few days off because the Red Sox went to 7 games and the Rockies were sitting on the bench for just a week. Even just that 1 week just took a completely red hot team and made them very mediocre. And then the Nationals, come out of nowhere this year. They play that extra game. They get a little life from the misplay that caused them to get the runs they needed to win the game. And then suddenly they're World Series champions. It was an incredible run that only really seems to happen in baseball. One of the things we talked about, though, is you also kind of build natural rivalries, though, right? Like when you say, I think we're going to kick this team's ass. Like if you're the Yankees and you have to choose your opponent, are you picking anyone else but the Minnesota Twins?
Of course. They're going to pick the Twins because, they own the Twins in the postseason. That's just the Twins are their annual tune-up. It's like the Yankees postseason invitational or something. It's like whenever they play the Twins every year.
It doesn't even matter if they're the number 1 and number 2 home run teams in the league. It's just the Yankees are just somehow always find a way to neutralize them. I don't know. You think they're just in Minnesota's head at this point? What is it? 18 straight series wins or something crazy like that?
Yeah, it's bad. I don't really know because you can't really compare some of those Twins teams of old to what they were dealing with last year. What they were dealing with, team they had last year was very strong. It's just we talk about pitching. They had the lineup, but besides Jose Berrios, that pitching staff was a little thin. This year, it's a little better because they have Kenta Maeda now. They have Jake Odorizzi. It should be better, but we'll see.
Yeah, let's see. So you said the A's were going to be a surprise team, and you definitely have to give it for Billy Beane for managing to put together a team. They were at the forefront again of the home run revolution, the swing upward, no more ground balls, just hit it in the air type of play. Do you like that in baseball, or do you think that has kind of hurt the game?
I think it has hurt the game, but I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. So I don't like it. I don't like the 3 true outcomes, home run, strikeout, walk, because it just makes games kind of drag on. It's like, what's going on here? You don't get as much of the small ball, the excitement, move guy over, ground ball through the side. But what I'm going to say is a bit controversial, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I do think that baseball needs to not eliminate, but control the limitations of the shift. If you didn't see as many extreme shifts, like kind of when Joey Gallo's out, you have your third baseman playing right field or something like that, you would see a lot more offense, obviously, right? Maybe they could have something that, you have to have 2 players on the left side of the second base bag or something. I think if we look at that aspect of the game, the shift, we would be able to kind of neutralize the effects that we're seeing with the 3 true outcomes. The reason we're seeing a lot of 3 true outcomes is because the launch angle, we have to be able to hit over the shift. We can't hit ground balls anymore. If we didn't have our defenses aligned in such an extreme manner, then maybe we wouldn't need to see guys swinging for the fences as much.
100%. The shift is brutal. When the shift really kind of started to take off more and more, I think a lot of these guys' production, we just saw it plummet, just immediately, guys that we had grown accustomed to just being among the top tier of hitters for years. As soon as oh yeah, we can shift all our guys to one side of the field, all those pull left-handed hitters went immediately into decline. Hell, even Bryce Harper, they're not even scared to see him go oppo anymore, which is, I think one of the big reasons why he's tailed off from, like you mentioned, MVP candidate to he's okay. He hit over 30-something home runs last year, but he's not nearly what he was, consistently over 300 hitter.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's tough. Now it's I see it all too often now. It's your second baseman who hits 30 bombs with a 225 average and a terrible on base percentage. It's what's going on here? High strikeout rates, but 30 home runs. It's this is really weird. It's
yeah, prayers up to Tony Gwynn, but if he was still alive, he'd be puking in his mouth.
Absolutely.
Just at some of these guys batting averages. I think one incredible Tony Gwynn statistic I was looking at is something I think he only had 14 strikeouts in 1 year. I don't know if that's completely accurate. I'd have to look at his player reference, but still I think when you just look at these inflated strikeout totals, they're so excessive. I think we're breaking new records in that every year, similar to breaking the home run record every year. Do you think that the ball was juiced? Is that a legitimate thing, or do you think it's just a bunch of hooey?
It was definitely juiced. Yeah. if it looks like a duck, it smells like, what do they say? Like, right? Like quacks like a duck or whatever. Yeah, it was definitely juiced. That's fine. I mean, Major League Baseball is trying to do what it can to impact viewership and improve viewership. The most telltale sign I saw of this was the first time it was juiced, 2017. That was when people started like scratching their heads. There was a new home run record set that year, and people were like, maybe the ball is juiced. That postseason, I believe it was Game 5 of the World Series in Houston when the Astros were cheating. That game was like home run derby. Dodgers, Astros. It was a game that Springer hit a ball off the train tracks and Huynh get one out with one hand, and it was like, I was like, wait a minute, something is going on here. 2018 was okay. Not as crazy. And in 2019, we just see home run totals. I mean, we can't just look at outliers like this. I mean, we could look at the statistics. You don't have to guess. I mean, we could look at the home run numbers across the board, and we see outliers all over the place. I mean, team home run totals are up. The Twins had, I believe it was 7 or 8 players in their lineup with 20-plus bombs last year. Things like that don't just happen. So I think the ball was definitely juiced.
If it was juiced, do you think that they should have kept with that? Or do you think that it did need to be regulated? Because, yeah, there was a lot of pitchers pissed off, but if your ultimate goal was to get viewership, as you mentioned, pitchers, you can eat this one. It's all about the fans.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because some pitchers actually said, like, when they would stick their hand in a bucket of balls, they could feel the difference between like the old ball and the new ball. So they knew, they're like, something, it's like a more tightly wound ball or whatever it was with the seams. So they knew, they could feel the difference. Verlander talked about this a lot. Obviously it's not fair to them, but someone has to pay for it, I guess. I don't really know. I guess that's just the way it is. Yeah, the pitchers kind of got the short end of the stick on that one.
Yeah, I mean, anytime these things happen, the pitchers are generally going to get the short end of the stick on it. I mean, whether it be sign stealing, steroids, or juiced balls, if people come to most sports, not just baseball, but of course the NFL, when you look at the rule changes that favored offense, the NBA, when you look at the lack of hand checking to favor, again, a more offensive play style. Generally, offense has always been good for ratings. So, I mean, maybe you could say with steroids, at least you had a juiced pitcher versus a juiced batter, so it was kind of even in a way. Yeah. But sign stealing, juiced balls, just so happened they had to overlap if you're an Astros player.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sign stealing one is just an interesting scandal all itself, ain't it? Because I was listening to Curt Schilling talk about it a little bit, and he was right. It's not so much that you know what's coming so you can hit it better. It's you know what's coming, so if it's a slider, if it's a ball in the dirt, you could lay off it and just wait on a fastball. And every major league hitter 1 through 9 can hit a fastball and put it in the seats. It doesn't matter who you are. That's how you got to the major leagues. Not too many people, like I said, we don't have a lot of gap-to-gap hitters anymore. Most of the major league players today are trying to hit in the seats. So if they know purely what a fastball is coming, it's going to work. And they had a high success rate. Tell me about the punishments in your eyes. Do you think they were fair?
The punishments were a bit soft, relatively, considering that no players are punished. But I think the Astros organization was punished fairly, because people want to downplay the aspect of losing draft picks in baseball, but I just can't do it. So first of all, they were fined $5 million, which is not that much for the owner, Jim Crane, but it's the most that they're allowed to based on the CBA. Second of all, they're losing their first and second round draft picks for each of the next 2 years. If you look at the Astros roster right now, and I can tell you just off the top of my head, first round picks, we're talking George Springer, we're talking Alex Bregman, we're talking Kyle Tucker, we're talking Carlos Correa. We're talking about, the core of their team were first round picks and high first round picks. So yes, losing a draft pick in baseball isn't as damaging as it might be in, let's say, basketball, but it's going to hurt them. What I would have liked to see is a little bit more due diligence done to at least dig into exactly which players are involved. But it sounds like Major League Baseball never intended to punish the players, and they gave them immunity right from the get-go. Like the very first week of interviews, they had already told the Players Association that no players would be suspended. So a lot of people believe that Rob Manfred never intended to truly get to the bottom of this, that he kind of wanted to bury this under the rug. I do kind of agree with that. I think the Manfred could have handled this better. But to answer your question, I think that the punishment is okay. I think it's fair.
You think it's fair? I mean, yeah. I mean, what can he do with the player suspensions? Because he had already came out there. He had already said the immunity is because we needed to extract information. And that's just how even the legal system works. If you have information that could damage like the person at fault, then you get granted immunity. I mean, that's why we have these confidential informants that just happen to go under the radar. Like, I'm a big Goodfellas fan. Goodfellas is one of my favorite movies of all time. And the reason they were able to get information on the mob in that movie is because Ray Liotta's character was a rat. So, I mean, Fires, he was another interesting thing. Do you think that he's been under too much unfair criticism from people like David Ortiz, Jessica Mendoza, or do you think that it's somewhat justified because he didn't speak up during the time?
Yes, I agree with the latter. I thought it was funny when this first came out. People were getting ready to knight this guy or consider Mike Fiers a saint. I was like, wait a minute. He didn't say anything about this when he was on the team. If he was such a stand-up guy, why didn't he speak about this when he was on the team? But no, he got his World Series ring. He got his bonus, everything. He benefited from the run support. It's not until he got to Oakland, a division rival, that it was now in his best interest to protect the Oakland A's, that he's now going to speak up to his teammates. Hey, in Houston, they're doing X, Y, and Z. So I was like, I mean, yes, it's good that he came out with it now, but let's pump the brakes on calling this guy some kind of savior or some kind of saint, because if he really was such an upstanding guy, he would have said something about it while he was on the team.
But there was also that narrative that the older veterans of the team, like Carlos Beltran, Alex Cora, etc., were kind of, in a way, silencing a lot of the younger players. Do you buy into that? Or do you really think that Carlos Beltran should be the fall guy for a lot of this? Do you think that that's just the Astros players trying to divert?
I don't think he should be the fall guy, because I don't think it should. Because something like that, something as intricate as that, it's a concerted effort. Everyone on the team, not everyone, but everyone at least who was using it was complicit and they were buying into it. So I don't think there's Alex Cora nor Carlos Beltran should be the face of this scandal, because that's just letting the other players off the hook way too easily.
Carlos Beltran's still a Hall of Famer after this?
I don't think he was a Hall of Famer to begin with. So.
No, I mean, he was, when you look at the all-time
close.
switch hitters.
He's close.
So Hall of very good?
Hall of very good, but if he's on the ballot long enough, kind of like a Larry Walker, who honestly should have been in a long time ago, but if he's on the ballot long enough, I think he will get in, but I'm afraid that Beltran might kind of fall off a bit too soon. I don't really know, because you are right, though, with all-time switch hitters. I mean, when you put the switch hitter, qualification in there, I do have to double think that, because you're looking at like Mickey Mantle, Chipper Jones, guys like that.
Relatively, he's just below those guys in terms of like the all-time switch hitter home run list. And
stolen bases.
Stolen bases, too. I mean, I'm still living down some Carlos Beltran regret from 2011 when the Giants traded him for Zach Wheeler. Granted, it didn't really work out for the Mets. So nothing really works out for the Mets. I mean, that's just kind of how their organization works.
Yep.
Baseball Hall of Fame, that's another interesting discussion to kind of delve into. We, a few weeks ago, talked about, obviously, Barry Bonds, Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, 8 years down, 2 more to go to get in. Someone apparently thought that Derek Jeter's not a Hall of Famer. I mean, if you can vote for whoever you want to or not want to, but I don't think anyone looks at Derek Jeter and says, yeah, that guy's not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So. The argument for that, I think, is very funny. So Jeter's Hall of Famer, hands down, everyone knows it. But there are some people who want to say, oh, so-and-so player is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Jeter's overrated, therefore, if Ken Griffey Jr. did deserve it, then Jeter doesn't. I'm like, is first ballot really that big of a deal? I mean, this is just my opinion. You're a Hall of Famer or you're not. If I'm a voter, which I'm not going to say like, oh, okay, this guy's a Hall of Famer, but just to prove a point, I'm not going to vote for him this year. I'm going to wait for next year. Then his numbers are going to change. His numbers are what they are. His career was what it was. And what a lot of people need to come to terms with is the fact that it's the Hall of Fame, right? Yes, overrated players are going to get a boost in the Hall of Fame because a guy like Derek Jeter was famous. I mean, he was captain for the New York Yankees for the biggest dynasty in baseball of his generation. He was the most popular player in baseball for some time. He's more famous than Scott Rowland. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. It is. I mean,
someone voted for Brad Penny on this year's Hall of Fame ballot.
Really? My goodness.
Let's put that out there. I want to see if that exact ballot, to see if this person that put Brad Penny was also the person that didn't put Jeter on their ballot.
Penny, man, that's a blast from the past. Wow.
I'm excited about this conversation, man. Like I said, like the last couple of years, my baseball knowledge has like kind of fallen off a little bit. Again, just when you have a average team, you know, your ability to just sit down and watch 100+ games in a year kind of does go into decline. One of the big things that kind of like kept my baseball knowledge around just has to be fantasy baseball, honestly. Just, you know, I don't know. Are you a big time fantasy baseball guy?
I am. I do play fantasy baseball. It's tough though to find enough people who are willing to stick to a full fantasy baseball season. I always do, but in most of the leagues I've played in, you find some people fall by the wayside around June, July, and then it's just kind of you and a few others. It's not the same as fantasy football, for example, where people just are in it, you know, the whole way through. But yes, I'm a big fan of fantasy baseball and I play.
Yeah, definitely around the All-Star break, you're right. It's just like half the league just dies off. Either they're just too low in the standings and don't care anymore, or they just don't have the time to just keep up with the minutia of daily baseball activity. So if you are one of the still active owners, you can find yourself some quality gems. I think like Lucas Giolito, who had a big breakout season last year, I managed to find him on the free agent wire all the way into like June, July, and he was already like on his way to being a Cy Young candidate by that point.
That's a steal. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Sometimes you just get lucky. Like, honestly, just even if you're casually look at your lineup at least once a week, if you just pick up someone at the top of the waiver wire, you could still remain pretty relevant in a fantasy baseball season for the most part. Yeah. All right. Let's do a quick rapid fire real quick. Let's do your predictions, because I know you went through all 30 teams. That's one thing I did notice from like your YouTube channel. So for the most part, I'm sure you have your predictions as far as who's going to come down with each division. So with that said, AL West, who's going to win?
AL West, Oakland A's.
Oakland A's. Okay. Here's an interesting thing about that. I think the Astros are still good.
I do too. I think the A's are I just think the A's are a good regular season team. I mean, they won 97 wins last year. I think they had mid-90s the year before that. Houston losing Garrett Cole is a big blow. I think it really is. Zach Greinke is good, but I think he kind of showed towards the end of the last year that maybe the American League is not the same beast it was when he was a Cy Young pitcher in it. I think Oakland's going to surprise people this year.
The Angels, though, you don't think the financial investments they make could pay off, or do you think that's just going to be another trash year for them?
They don't have the pitching. I mean, Griffin Canning's UCL is hurt right now. He's probably going to get Tommy John sometime soon. That's not a report. Yeah. That's just my assumption. Shohei's not going to be back until June.
Madden, though, he's a good manager.
Madden's a very good manager. That is true. He is. I like Madden, but no, what we're going to see at the Angels is we'll probably see Joe Adell come up sometime in the summer. He's the next big prospect in baseball. He's going to be the right fielder sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I was telling my dad for years, it's just like Mike Scioscia, he had run his course in Anaheim. It was time for them to move on, and they finally found a good replacement here. And Joe Madden, it just, like you said, if you can piece all those pieces together and make it work, you're right. One of the big indictments on Mike Trout's legacy is the lack of postseason success. I want to see him in this year's playoffs just because of that, to be honest. Okay.
Right. I would love to see Trout in the playoffs too.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Okay. So you're going with the Athletics. I can respect that. Central, some buzz in there that the White Sox might be a sneaky team. The Indians, I mean, they did lose some pieces to their rotations. That's going to hurt them. And then the Twins, last year's leader in home runs, can they keep up that level of production?
I think they can. They got the bringer of rain, Josh Donaldson. He's only going to help them. I think the Twins will win the Central this year for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just outslug everyone.
Similarly to last year. Yep.
All right. Then this one, near and dear to you. I obviously think you're just going to discount the Red Sox from winning the crown this year. But, I mean, AL East, is it too obvious?
I don't think it's obvious. I think Tampa Bay will win the AL East this year.
Wow.
I think the Tampa Bay Rays will win it. That's a very hot take, and it's also half wishful thinking, but the injuries that the Yankees have sustained already, I think that they can only catch lightning in a bottle so many times. Last year, doing it with Gio Urshela, Mike Tauchman, guys like that. Right now, they're missing Stanton. Judge is a question mark. Paxton's out. Severino's out. Domingo Germán's out on domestic violence suspension until June. You can only lose so many pieces. I mean, there's only so much Gleyber Torres can do and Masahiro Tanaka can do. Meanwhile, the Rays somehow, not that they have any big names either, but I mean, they have some good all-stars, Austin Meadows, for example, Tyler Glasnow, Brandon Lau. Somehow they always, they squeeze every last ounce out of their players and they win 95-plus games a year. It's very weird how they do it, but I think this is Tampa Bay's year to win the AL East.
Is Tampa still going to be in Tampa in 5 years? Off subject, but
I think they will, but they'll move out of St. Peter. So right now they're in St. Petersburg, which is like, I'm not a Tampa native, but I've heard it's just really hard to get to. So if they actually move into Tampa proper, then they'll see a lot more fans come to the game. They'll see increase in their attendance. So I think they'll just move to a new stadium in Tampa proper.
Okay. So, I mean, wild card. I mean, I assume since you're not going with the Yankees to win the division, they're probably going to be in one of your wild card spots.
Yeah, definitely. I'll go with Yankees and Astros for those wild card spots.
That would be a good first game. I mean, if you want to introduce the postseason in style, one game play in, do you want it to be in Houston or do you want to be in New York?
It's got to be in New York, man. I want to see that crowd get into it. I mean, then again, that's postseason time. We don't know if this whole tour of shame, the booing for the Astros will last that long. I hope it doesn't die down anytime soon, but we'll see. If it's in New York, I'm sure their fans will get up for that.
People were still throwing syringes on the field for Barry Bonds games well after like the scandal really hit full steam. So baseball fans, they remember things. And I think the wound is still going to be pretty fresh by the time that potential matchup would come about. Ooh, that would be a good one.
That would.
Fun thing too, like if you were going to add a suspension or anything to the Astros punishment, I think removing their possibility of postseason play would have made sense.
Yes. That because you see that in other sports. You've seen that, I think, in like European soccer. You'll see that being banned from Champions League. I think Man City or something like that. That would be a pretty good punishment. I think that'd be pretty apt to ban them from the postseason.
Because how bitter do you think every fan in baseball would be if somehow, some way, the Astros players, I mean, you mentioned it, they still have premium talent. Correa, Bregman, Altuve. These guys are no slouches. Verlander's still at the top of that rotation. They could win it.
They could. Yeah, it's true.
And having Rob Manfred hand over the commissioner's trophy to them this year?
Man, that would be so many, like if that happened, if Houston won and seeing, that would be a picture that would just go down in like infamy. So many people would be livid. Like, why is this team still allowed to be playing in the postseason? And here they are being handed yet another trophy by the commissioner who failed to punish them. That would be quite a headline.
With that said, at that point, like when you look at those players' legacies, because this is also going to follow them around to when it comes to potential Hall of Fame discussions down the road. Having a year where they're one where you would think they wouldn't have any possibility of cheating with all eyes on them. That would basically solidify it didn't matter if we had a trash can, a buzzer, whatever you say, we're just good. We're that damn good. And I do think that in a certain manner of respect, the Astros players are probably going to unify behind that slogan this year.
Absolutely. That would be the biggest ball don't lie move ever. To just go out and win the World Series.
I mean, it happened in the NFL a few years back. Remember when Brady, coming off his 4-game suspension, happened to win that year's Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons? Deflated or not, I still got the biggest balls on stage.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, NL. So let's start with the West. Again, I think it's pretty obvious because of the World Series picks, but tell me what you think.
Yeah, it's going to be the Dodgers. They'll do what they always do. They'll carry 6 or 7 pitchers in a 5-man rotation. They'll switch them out because they'll keep one guy on the injured list. This is what they do every year. No surprise. And then around August or so, they'll call up a nice rookie pitcher or so to give him an audition and, rest guy. That's the Dodgers formula. They've been doing this every year. But then they'll go into October having won about, 98 games or so. And then we'll see what happens from there.
Kershaw's legacy. What do you think that's?
It's taking a huge hit. It's taking a huge hit. And I've been hard on Kershaw. Yes, this cheating scandal absolves him a little bit. But let's not forget that Kershaw had been choking in the postseason long before this Astros cheating scandal ever occurred. And if you just look at this past year against the Dodgers, yes, Dave Roberts put him in really bad spots, obviously against the Nationals. He had no business facing Rendon or Soto, but it definitely hurts. It tarnishes his legacy because his postseason numbers aren't not good. And he's just not the same pitcher he used to be, but even in his quote-unquote prime, he never really put up good numbers in the postseason. And yes, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but it's a stain on his resume for sure.
It's still insane to me because we did a best of the decade series to close out 2019. We, as a unified staff, said we think that Kershaw was the best pitcher of last decade, but it was hard to overlook. The guy has a 7+ ERA in postseason play. But you did bring up a good point against the Astros. I just want to throw that out there real quick. In Game 5 of the 2017 World Series, Kershaw threw 51 sliders/curves, give or take, and the Astros didn't swing at any of them. So, yeah. I mean, that tells you the type of impact that the sign-stealing scandal really had on the game. Because if you take away Clayton Kershaw's nasty, and I mean just deadly nasty curveball, then he's just a guy that throws 93, and even that number is going down every year. So, I mean, that kind of explains why you could dominate him a little bit more in that situation. But yeah, all right, Dodgers, NL West champions. Okay. Was that like the 8th year in a row, 9th year in a row?
Yeah, seems like it.
It doesn't matter. Giants still got the rings, baby.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. NL Central.
NL Central, I'm going to go with the Cardinals.
Okay.
Most definitely. I think it's Cardinals, Cubs, Brewers, those three. The Brewers, they lost a lot. They lost Moustakas. They lost Yasmani Grandal. That's a big one. Their pitching has always been suspect. Of course, they have Christian Yelich, but I just don't think they have enough there. The Cubs also have a lot of question marks on their team, just all over the place. I mean, who's going to be their second baseman now that Ben Zobrist isn't playing anymore? The outfield, they have Hayward and Schwarber there, but who's going to be the third outfielder? They have a lot of question marks. The Cardinals seem to have a lot fewer question marks, and on top of that, they have young talent that's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Just on top of that, they seem to have a wealth of talent. So I think the Cardinals will run away with NL Central.
Oh, the Cardinals always blow my mind. They're just one of the models of consistency. What they're able to do with player development from the minor leagues upward has just been nothing short of phenomenal. Every year of my life, I feel like the Cardinals always compete. But I do actually like the Brewers a little bit more. I do think with MVP candidate like Yelich leading that team, if he didn't get hurt in that season's end, I do think that maybe they could have been more of a sneaky, tough, gritty team. They were so close to beating the Nationals, who ended up being last year's World Series champion.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great game to watch. But yeah, a healthy Christian Yelich, who knows what happens, right? Might have been the MVP if he was healthy.
I mean, I've also heard some people throughout the Reds here. Do you think that that's just a cloud of smoke? Yeah.
That's not happening. Yeah.
It's hard to jump, like I said.
Exactly.
Really
exactly. But to the Reds' defense, I can't remember. I might be a year late. Maybe it was last year that said that their numbers, if you look at, I think it was their Pythagorean win-loss total, which is based on run differential, indicated that they were a better team than they actually showed based on run differential. I can't remember if that was the previous year or not. I might be a year late, but yeah, they do have quite a bit of a gap to close.
NL East, I'm going Braves.
NL East, yeah, I'm going with the Braves as well. I love what they're doing in Atlanta. They have this young – so I just have a thing for teams with a young core of players because it's like your base. You can always build off of that. You can trade from that, to get more back in. You can develop them. You can promote them. It's a base you always want to have in place because it's just like this youthful well that keeps giving. The Braves have been feeding from that well over the past couple of years. It seems every single summer there's a 20-year-old kid in Atlanta doing big things. I mean, last year it was Austin Riley who had that really hot stretch. The year before, it was Ron Acuna and Ozzie Albies. They've had pitchers come through, guys like Touki Toussaint. They have, Kyle Wright on the way, Bryce Wilson. So they have really good young talent, and they have more on the way. I mean, if you look at their outfielders coming in, Christian Pache, Drew Waters, a local kid from there in Atlanta. I love what they're doing. I think they're going to continue to improve. They got Marcell Ozuna out there in left field. I like the Braves in the NL East for sure.
Okay. Give me a couple of wild cards.
Wild card, Nats. And then my second National League wild card, that's going to be tough. It's either going to be the D-backs or the Brewers. Because the D-backs did have that run that last year, kind of on the low. Not many people realized that, but they were within striking distance of the playoffs for a little bit, up until like maybe August even. But then, everything you mentioned about the Brewers as well, they're a good team. They have an MVP candidate on their team. They're also very likable for a wild card.
Yeah, part of me wanted to give the Padres a little love. I do think that the Manny Machado deal didn't work out quite like they were expecting to last year. But, I mean, they have been trying to build something over the last few years, and they do have one of the better farm systems, according to more of the, prospect, focus websites that I've noticed. They said a lot of those guys are set to come out this year, and they aren't afraid to spend. So if they are competing around the deadline, I do think that they do have enough pieces to potentially add another impact bat, another core piece to their rotation. And that's why I kind of want to put them as a sneaky team to put on people's radar. All right. So, I mean, that catches up on everything baseball. Let's just have some fun discussions now. One of the big things I always think with baseball is baseball has some of the best sports movies of all time. Tell me, what is your favorite baseball movie?
Favorite baseball movie is Rookie of the Year, Henry Rowan Gardner. That's a good one for me. I mean, when that kid breaks his arm, he comes back throwing whatever it is, 100 in the upper 90s. I just thought that was a fun movie to watch when I was a lot younger, and that's my favorite baseball movie for sure.
That's a good one. I do think you kind of can break it apart, like your favorite kid baseball movie versus your favorite adult one, because Major League is hands down mine. Just the characters in that movie. Wild Thing, Willie Mays Hayes, Pedro Serrano, Jobu's a character himself. Harris, the old pitcher, Roger Dorn. just like the fact that I could just pull these names out of like my back pocket each and every day just tells me how memorable that movie is. We actually have a fun series on our YouTube channel where we talk about sports movies. And like when we did the Major League review, it just like brought back so many instant good memories. And that's just like how I view a movie is, can I watch this any day of the week?
That's a good criteria for sure.
Yeah. Would you say like Rookie of the Year, if it's on TV, you could just like jump into it right away?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay. Let's do some let's go down the list here. Let's do some verses here. All right. Bad News Bears versus Summer Catch.
Bad News Bears.
Bad News Bears.
Yeah.
The remake versus Summer Catch. Do you like the remake?
Yeah.
There's moments.
Yeah. Remake.
All right. A League of Their Own versus Moneyball.
Moneyball, hands down. That's a great one. I actually forgot about Moneyball, but yeah, I like Moneyball.
Field of Dreams versus Sandlot.
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. Field of Dreams versus Sandlot. I think I'll go Sandlot, but it's close. I think I'll go Sandlot.
Okay. Hardball versus Bull Durham.
Bull Durham.
Bull Durham's a good one. Okay. I think I got a good read on you. What's the surprise one I'm not thinking of? One that I haven't mentioned.
Yeah, I think you hit at least the good ones I was thinking of.
For the Love of the Game, which is kind of okay. Nothing too special. You have The Rookie.
The Rookie, yeah. That one's actually pretty good. I like that one.
Kind of an underrated one.
Yeah.
I'm not a big Angels in the Outfield kind of guy.
Yeah, it has its place, but it's probably not every day of the week.
It doesn't age well.
Right.
You know, there are just some like movies that just like they are from the 80s, they are from the 90s. They just don't like age too well. I think like Sandlot, one of its biggest advantages is that it's just made in the 60s, 70s. The setting is just the 60s, 70s. So like it doesn't matter what's going on in the world today. You know, you could just watch it in that mindset.
Right.
Plus, you know, it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Wendy Peppercorn, she never ages. Okay. All right. Let's kind of like test kind of like more or less your knowledge outside of the ring of the MLB. Because you did mention you're into other sports and everything. So let's talk about some stuff that's kind of like going on. We talked about it last week, the NFLPA, the 17-game proposed schedule set to play. The NFL is looking like they're going to get their way. They're going to get that 17-game schedule, mostly because the players can't seem to make up their mind on what they want to do. There seemed to be a pretty even split. And, you know, when you have the NFL, who's pretty solidified on what they want to do, and then you have the NFLPA, who half the players are, okay, whatever. If we play 17 games, it's more money for our players, more money for our union. And then the other half is like, no, we play 17 games. There's more chance of us getting hurt. There's more chance of players getting taken advantage of. I'm not about that. So with that said, do you think that the NFL should go to the 17-game schedule? What are your kind of like thoughts on it?
I think 17 is a good compromise. I mean, I heard a couple of years ago, people talking about 18, cutting preseason down to 2, and then doing 18. 18 seems like quite a marathon, at least for football. 17 seems like a good compromise, 3 preseason games, because obviously, you know, your starters never play the final preseason game anyway. So 2 real tune-up games and then like kind of like a walkthrough, I think is good. So I like 17.
So Deji, real quick, following up on that then, if there's 17 games, so Juju and I, we were sort of going back and forth on this last week. How do you decide who gets that extra home game? So, you know, we're sort of worried about the NFL just basically saying that, hey, if you don't bring in, you know, enough fans into your stadium, you're always going to get that extra away game, as opposed to some of your major organizations, right? Like, you know, that you've got your Patriots, right? The Steelers, the Dallas Cowboys, they're always going to pack the stands. So do you give them home games, or what's your criteria for determining that last home versus away game?
Winning percentage. I think that's just the fairest way to do it. Winning percentage, just like you would do in the standings. Or, I mean, you don't really have as much head-to-head in football as you would in other sports. They don't play each other as much. I think winning percentage would be the best, and then you have tiebreakers, maybe record within your division. Not too sure, but I would start by win percentage.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So then do you leave that 17th game sort of as a to be determined, right? And then you see where the teams are going to line up basically by the end of the season?
Yeah, exactly.
And then
exactly, yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I like that. So then what do you think about also expanding the playoffs, right? So that's also been sort of talked about in the CBA bargaining agreement. Do you think that they should expand the playoffs? Is 7 teams too much? Is it too little?
I think it's pretty good the way it is now, especially with the way, they have that bye built in. So, you get that. So, I mean, I'm a Patriots fan. Many people might hate if I say that, but basically the Patriots formula for who knows how long was always first round bye, you win, and you go to AFC Championship. That's literally been the formula how it's been working. So as a Patriots fan, selfishly, hey, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Throwing an extra game in there might be a bit tough. Also because at that time of year, players are already banged up. Adding an extra layer to the postseason could be a risk for injury that might not be necessary.
So let me get this straight here. So you live in Houston, you're a Red Sox fan, and you cheer for the Patriots as well.
Yep.
How do I know you're not the mastermind behind all these scandals? Because things are starting to add up here. I'm starting to notice a theme in your teams here. What are you going to tell me next for, let's see here, NBA? Well, there's not really too many cheaters in the NBA. You cheer for the refs. That's what's going on.
No, I'm just a Boston sports fan. So it's funny how that started. I guess I'll give a background on how that came to be. Basically, when I started watching baseball was 2008. It was Dustin Pedroia's MVP year. I was a lot younger. Dustin Pedroia won the MVP that year. I was like, this dude is good. I like this guy. He's gonna be my favorite player. So Dustin Pedroia became my favorite baseball player, and I was like, well, I'm gonna cheer for his team. And then I was like, well, if I'm cheering for the Red Sox, I'll just cheer for all the other Boston teams, and that's exactly how it happened. So I'm just a Boston sports fan, Boston/New England sports fan.
I get you. Okay, this is a kind of interesting thing we were talking about too. Isn't it funny how baseball mentions their expansion plan for the playoffs, and everyone's like, you can't do that. Come on, what are you doing? This is just a gimmick. Stupid. Come on. Giving one team the bye and all the other teams play in that wild card weekend. Then football does it a week later, and everyone's like, yeah, NFL, right on, making the right move.
Yep. It's funny. It just goes to show the difference in the demographics. Baseball's fan base skews older, and basketball and football skew younger. So in baseball's fan base, it skews older. People like the tradition and they want the history to kind of remain the same. Whereas, younger fans in football and basketball don't really have a problem seeing change because, they just haven't been watching for as long. They don't really remember maybe the 80s or, 70s or whatnot. So I think that has to do with it.
And what about picking teams? Do you think, do you still stand behind, hey, it would be cool to see these teams sort of be able to pick right in that wild card weekend?
Absolutely. It's like playground. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it adds to that element of, what's going to happen, who's going to pick who, adds to the rivalries, right? Like if you think that you're just so much better than another team, or, ownage is ownage, right? Like we were sort of talking about with the Yankees is, hey, I'm going to pick that team, even though they might, not be the worst team there is. I know that I can beat them every single year in the postseason. And that's just because we're that much better, or, we're big brother to them basically. So yeah, I totally agree.
What does it say that the NFLPA is so split on this decision?
It's not good. It's not a good look for the players because it's like, well, if you can't even, not everyone's going to have the same voice. You can't consolidate your voice, but at least you can't get on the same wavelength. Then you're not going to be able to get anything done. We've seen the NFL go on a strike before. I guess that's just what happens when you have differing opinions. The NBA went on a strike actually not too long ago. So maybe strikes are just inevitable. I don't really know.
I think you're right. I think a strike is likely going to come. I don't know if it necessarily says anything good or bad about the players union. But what I do find interesting, though, is that there have been some people that have come out and said, hey, we're going to start putting away $250,000 of our own money, right? So you got some of your veterans, the Pouncey brothers, for instance, I know them, have come out and said, this year I'm going to put away $250,000 of my own money into a fund for if we do have to strike in the 2021 season, right, we'll at least be able to take care of as many people as we can, assuming, a lot of other veterans put into that. So while I agree, Juju, a little bit of that, hey, it's really polarized right now, that might not necessarily bode well. I do think that there are some other efforts and initiatives which are a good sign that the players are sort of together in this.
The problem with strikes, just in general, is those elite tier guys, they're going to be fine no matter what. It's always going to be the lower guys on the totem pole that have to make that tough decision. I can strike and I can forfeit my game checks for the majority of the time that's taking place, or I can alienate myself, be considered a scab, and play, which is something that always happens anytime a sport goes into strike. Because look at the XFL. You have all these players that are trying their hardest to get back into the league. Those guys are going to be more than happy to take the spots on NFL rosters or daily lineups should a strike ever occur. And owners don't care. If there's an opportunity to put NFL football on the field, they'll take that in a heartbeat. They even put the replacement refs out there a few years back when the refs went on strike, and people are still going to show up. You're still going to watch a Steelers game, regardless if it's strike players or regular players, or when I say regular players, just like not the stars necessarily in there, because it's your team. I mean, players are more, in the NFL in particular, people are more attached to the team than they are necessarily to individual players.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference between the NBA and the NFL. The NBA is a star-driven league. Everyone knows it. It's all about the players. I mean, if you look at this past summer, the free agency, my goodness, the world froze when Kawhi Leonard couldn't decide where he was going. It's a star-driven league. The NFL, it's all about the team.
And I think the sort of tiers when it comes to the salary makes that problem even worse, right? So it sort of exacerbates that problem in that you have some of these guys only making maybe, a few $100,000 across an entire season. Whereas, like you said, Juju, your top tier quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, they're making millions. They're going to be fine, right? So they can afford to sit out. But those other guys where, they're really not making that much more money than, let's say, an engineer at Google, they have to play. Because if they don't, then they're going to lose their house. They're going to lose their car. They're not going to be able to feed their family.
Overall, a strike's never really great for anyone, just in terms if you do want to see a quality product on the field. That's not particularly fun to talk about. It's not good if, like we mentioned, you are going to be those, like, not even just the low tier guys, the guys who are next man up. Like, let's say, you have Patrick Mahomes, obviously, who's going to get paid big time. Does it hurt him if he's like one of these striking players versus not? Like if he take one of the big stands, does that kind of make the Chiefs think about like his potentially $200 million guaranteed deal coming down the pipe? Probably not, just because Patrick Mahomes is such a great elite tier player overall. But I do think that, anytime you see a strike, you just risk future contracts too. It's a possibility. It's something that I don't think anyone wants to see. All right. So obviously baseball is your top sport, but would you say you lean more NFL or lean more NBA?
I'd say I lean more NBA, but I definitely do keep tabs on the NFL because when you're a Pats fan, I guess it's easier to do.
So are you a Celtics fan too? Because I'm
a Celtics fan. Yeah, I'm a Celtics
Perfect.
fan. Yeah.
My guy here. All right. So you are outnumbered in this conversation here, Dre. So he's a Lakers fan. Got a couple Celtics fans on this discussion.
Yeah, you guys are just both wrong.
Oh, man. I mean, you guys, the Lakers have the superstars. I can't really speak to that. I'm a firm believer. A lot of Celtics fans are in the camp that, we have a rotation with 4 guys who are capable of being the best player on the floor any given night, which I think is true. But the playoffs are a different beast. Like it's so rare to see a team win it all in the NBA without an MVP candidate or like an all NBA, like first team all NBA kind of player. When you look at the Lakers, when you have Bron and AD, it's just tough to beat that.
We got Jason Tatum looking pretty good these days. Who's to say he's not going to be that MVP superstar maybe by next year? He's already moved in the span of a couple months from being a good player to a very good player to being an all-star, now potentially being an all-pro style superstar, especially coming out of the Eastern Conference. There were players that were saying that he looked like the best player in the floor whenever they were playing in Staples Center a couple weeks back. And I do think that he has potential to carry that on. You could say some is probably Kemba being off the court. You could say that they just focus on him more for that 4 to 5 game stretch. But, we've seen it in Jason Tatum's development from him dunking on LeBron in the playoffs to now that he's really coming into his own. And I think he's going to be one of those players that carries the league for the next couple of years, particularly being on a big-time brand like Boston. One of the top discussions come out, too, because I mentioned LeBron. Do you think he should win the MVP this year?
Wow, that's a very, very good question. I was tough on Bron coming into this year because last year the lack of defense, and I was like, his age is showing through his lack of defense. But right now, I would say he is the front runner. he and Giannis are 1A and 1B. But if the Lakers keep doing what they're doing, I think that he would be a front runner. I mean, the Bucks also are, going to be top of the East. It's tough, but LeBron being able to, I mean, if you look at most of the advanced metrics, real plus minus, win shares, things like that, I believe LeBron's number 1 or 2 on almost all those lists. And the narrative, the storyline, being able to bring, this new team. He's gone from team to team, being able to take them to greater heights. The narrative is such a huge part of the MVP discussion in basketball. Whereas this year, I mean, last year was Giannis's year. I'm not really sure what the Bucks narrative would be this year. So I think Bron and Giannis would be 1A and 1B right now if I had to vote.
Yeah. I mean, I think adding into that, right, like I think LeBron is going to get it, not just because I'm a Lakers fan, but also, you have to factor in he's playing with Anthony Davis, who's also getting quite a bit of votes when it comes to an MVP candidate. And so you could argue, hey, that's taking away votes from LeBron. But I do think that it factors in that he's still putting up such good numbers and he still has to share the time with, Anthony Davis, Kyle Kuzma, Avery Bradley. Like you get Danny Green even. So you got a lot of these guys LeBron still has to share the ball with, and he's still able to accomplish what he's been doing. The other thing is when you look at sort of the stretches where the Lakers have played without Anthony Davis but had LeBron, they're still able to win, keep up their win percentage, do a great job. But if you do the opposite, right, they still play with Anthony Davis without LeBron, their offense is totally destroying and it's just not the same, right? And so just that wow factor that LeBron sort of has, and you could just see the impact on the offense. Now, granted, right, like if you took Giannis out of the Bucks offense, they're definitely not going to be as strong. They're not going to be as good. But I think it's just a little bit harder, like you said, to go back-to-back years. There's not really that narrative with Giannis. This one, though, it's LeBron in his year 17 season. He's still putting up these numbers. And if you were to take him away from the Lakers immediately sort of tank, right? And so with all of that being said, I agree. I think it's going to be LeBron probably. And then a really, really close second would be Giannis.
I agree.
Yeah, he's looking good. Age 17, like I said, there's also the Kobe narrative out there. There's just in general, like his stance against load management. At least, he's come out there and said publicly, like, he's not a big fan of load management, even though he'll occasionally miss the game too. It happens. So yeah. I think LeBron's on a little bit of a high horse with that one. But yeah. Okay. So with that said, let's make some more picks. Who do you think? Who's your NBA Finals matchup this year?
Man, I have the Clippers coming out of the West. Clippers coming out of the West, and in the East, man, I really want to say the Bucks, but I'll play it safe. I'll play it safe for the sake of today's show. I'll say Clippers Bucks. I'm not gonna make any hot takes on that one. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's get you one more hot take before we head on out here. Where's Tom Brady going?
Oh, he's staying. Brady's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. I mean, first of all, he knows that if he leaves New England, he's going to get exposed. He's already being exposed a little bit because of his age, let's be honest. But the offense, like Josh McDaniels and Belichick, have done a very good job of insulating him from that. But that's going to tarnish his resume, legacy, whatever you want to call it, if he goes to a place like Oakland or Vegas now, I should say, or the Chargers and just absolutely stinks it up. That's not going to do anything good. He's a Patriot for life. Tom Brady's not going anywhere.
So do you think that even after the video with, Julian Edelman and him, they're, down, I can't remember what type of event that they were at, but you basically see him courtside or field side. And Julian Edelman saying like, oh, he's back or he's coming back, something along those lines. And it looked like Tom Brady said, no, he's not. At least he mouthed it, right? So
yeah, I think that was at the Syracuse basketball game a couple of days ago. Yeah.
I think you're right.
Man, no, that's that is a good point, but I just cannot see any logical reason as to why Tom Brady would want to leave. Like people are saying it's due to the money that the Pats don't want to give him a 2-year deal or whatever. Does Brady really need money at this point in his career? That's what I think. Is he really the kind of guy that is going to be chasing money? Like, he's made all the money he needs. His wife makes more. They're fine. Like, I just can't see him tarnish, because he knows that if he leaves, it's going to tarnish his resume. It's going to tarnish his legacy. And people are not going to look at it. They're going to have that bad taste in their mouths. The last piece of tape you see on Brady is going to be him struggling to throw the ball downfield for the Raiders. It's like, I just can't imagine him playing anywhere else other than the Patriots.
I mean, I think that it is a little bit more than money, though. I think he does want to win outside of New England. I do think that that is a legitimate desire that he may have, at least to have at most like a Joe Montana type ending. You know, like Joe Montana still managed to lead a Chiefs team to the playoffs, came short of a Super Bowl, but, you know, he did do that, so showed essentially he could win at two different places. Has been with Bill for 20 years. Now, I do ultimately think that he ends up in New England himself. I do think eventually they're just going to come to terms to say, hey, listen, we can pay you this. Let's just sign on the dotted line. You can play a couple more years, and that'll be that. But I can't say I'm not intrigued at the possibility of seeing Tom Brady on another team. There would be that element of, you know, kind of like interest. Is it Bill or Brady? It's not a fair assessment just because obviously Brady would be outside of what we think his prime is, or at least what the typical prime for an athlete is. It would ultimately depend on where he went. You mentioned the Raiders. That would be a little bit like, are they really a team that's built to compete? Probably closer to no. Similarly, I would say that when it comes to the other teams, I think the only real winner would be like Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee made it to the AFC Championship game last year. So they are a tough, competitive team to see him go to. They have the right pieces there. When you look at a Derrick Henry, when you look at a Corey Davis and some of the other players they have on that roster, their defense is okay. Not as good as the Patriots, though, honestly. So, you know, it's intriguing. I mean, it's probably the most interesting free agent that's been on the market since Peyton Manning.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm glad you brought up Peyton Manning, because he's another guy that we thought wouldn't wear another uniform, but he did. He ended up being a Denver Bronco. So I guess maybe I might have to walk back on my statement. Even the all-time greats. I mean, Brady is the GOAT. So it's a little bit different. It's just hard to imagine him in a uniform. But I guess with that being said, it's not impossible. It's happened before.
What do you think has been one of the weirdest, like, player retirements in a opposing jersey do you think you've seen? Like Randy Johnson finishes his career in San Francisco with the Giants. I thought that was a weird end to his career. I know, like, let's see, didn't Allen Iverson finish his career somewhere weird too? I
mean, obviously Michael Jordan. That's one. The Wizards. That's a tough one. It's like, what? Yeah, I mean, there've been a couple of those. That's a really good question. Who retired? So Jeter retired a Yankee. I'm just thinking of the iconic guys. Big Papi retires the Red Sox. Oh man, Pedro. Pedro obviously ended. I think he was a Philly the last time he pitched. Pedro Martinez. That was a bit interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not too sure though. That's a very good question.
Yeah, not everyone in sports tends to have that Derek Jeter type ending, to being able to be in pinstripes their entire career. Let's do some quick ones. So in your own backyard, you got probably the most exciting XFL team. And the team I've adopted is my favorite, the undefeated Houston Roughnecks. Let's just make some quick XFL predictions. Week 5, I mean, I know you said you haven't paid super attention to it, but I mean, it is a league that's going on nonetheless, that's having some fun, and they've produced a pretty decent product, I think. So we like to end the show with some predictions. See the opening odds right now. So we're picking against the money line here. The Roughnecks are actually going to be playing the Seattle Dragons this week. They are 13-point favorites. The over-under is sitting at 46.5. Deji, Dre, either one want to make a quick prediction?
Deji, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take the Roughnecks on that one for sure. I haven't paid too much attention, but I have seen some of their games. Yeah, I'll take the Roughnecks, and on the over-under, I'll take the over. I'll take the over on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's going to be the Roughnecks, and I think they've been over on almost all of their games. So I don't know why I would take the under. So I will also take the over on this one.
I'm going to take the Roughnecks and the over because you're right. I mean, it's not just they score at a quick enough pace. It's also other teams have to keep up with them and tend to drive that line upward. So I'm going to take the Roughnecks and the over. As far as will they cover? Yeah, 13 points. I think they could beat Seattle by that much. Okay. Then we got the Guardians versus the Renegades, the Dallas Renegades. The Renegades are a 7.5-point favorite as of today. The over-under is sitting at 36.5. Landry Jones, their starting quarterback, had a brutal leg injury in this past game, the battle for Texas, Houston versus Dallas, and after throwing 3 interceptions in the first 3 drives of the game. So, with that said, Dre, who do you got?
I think, like you said, because of Landry Jones sort of taking that injury, right? That's going to be a big question mark at the QB position. We already know that offensive talent is really limited in this league, right? So if you can even be decent, like if you play at a decent NFL level on offense, you're pretty much outstanding for the XFL right now. So given that they lost one of the better quarterbacks in the league, right? Probably one of the top 4, even though I know there's only 8 teams, and that's still a big hit. So
it's like being in a small school. It's like being in a small high school. You can say like, hey, I was, top of my class, top percentile, but exactly. I graduated with 5 people.
He has the 4th most passing yards. So you can say that for sure out of Landry Jones. But that injury, I think it is gonna impact the team. So I'm gonna take the New York Guardians upset.
Okay. So overall upset. Deji?
I will go with you as well. I mean, yeah, offense is the name of the game.
Okay. The over-under is 36.5. What you guys got on that?
I think I'm going to take the under. Like I said, I don't see Dallas with, a backup quarterback. I don't see them doing all that well, scoring a whole lot of points. And so I'm going to take the under.
Same reason. Offense is the name of the game. You lose your starting QB in the XFL. That's tough. I'm going with the under on that.
Here's the thing. I think that with a 7.5-point line is too high. So I'm actually going to take the Renegades against the points. And I will go the under as well, just because the XFL, I noticed since we started doing the money lines that they unfortunately don't seem to cover a lot of those bigger lines. So, yeah. I'm going to go with that. The St. Louis Battlehawks will be doing battle with the DC Defenders this week. Battlehawks are a 3-point favorite to start the week. The Defenders have just fallen off a cliff. Like, they've gone blown out the last 2 weeks after being one of the league's hottest teams. So I don't really know what to make of them right now. Cardale Jones, he went from getting a potential NFL contract this year to, now disregard that completely. With that said, they're finally back at home. The line is 39.5, and I'm going to make the first prediction here. I do think I'm going to actually take the Defenders. I'm going to take them in the outright upset here. I do think that after just 2 weeks of just pathetic play, that they'll bounce back. There were some big throws that Cardale Jones just missed that if you complete those, it's a total game changer. He just got to cut down on the turnovers, and I think they'll be fine. The over-under for this game, I'm actually going to go with the over on 39.5. I think it could be like a 28-21 game, which would beat that line.
I saw the tape on Cardale Jones, and that didn't look good. That really didn't look good. I think he was the better player when he was at Ohio State. So with that being said, I'll take St. Louis.
Okay, gotcha. All right, let's see here. So the last game of the week, Tampa Bay Vipers, LA Wildcats. The Vipers get their first win against those DC Defenders. They were looking like the worst team in the league, but their defense is really kind of settled in. 1-point game against the Wildcats, have to go cross-country into Los Angeles. The Wildcats are the favorite in the over-under, sitting at 41. Dre, start us off here.
So, the Wildcats are my team, right? Like, I have to have an LA-based team. Though they look really good in their one win, and then they look really bad in their losses as well. That being said, I'm going to take the Wildcats. Tampa Bay having to go cross-country, LA playing at home. They're both fairly even matchups. I also think that the Defenders, like you said, they're on a 2-game losing streak. They just look really, really bad as of late. And I think the Vipers were able to capitalize on that. So I think their win looked a little bit better than maybe it really is. So I will take the Wildcats. And with that, since it's a 1-point line, I guess I've got to take the over.
I'll take the Wildcats, and I will also hammer the under there. Deji, close us out strong here.
Yeah, I mean, cross-country trip, never easy. Go with Wildcats.
Then that is that. So we covered the XFL, the NFL, the NBA, and of course the MLB. Deji, thank you for coming on to the show, a Baseball Connection podcast. I think our listeners definitely, after listening to this show, know that you're a good source of information when it comes to this sport, that you do a good job in your analysis, that you have your ear to the ground when it comes to some of the better prospects coming out, some of your history, and even just, entertainment, because we talk some baseball movies on here. So, I really appreciate having you on. If you want to do the obligatory plugs for your show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, sure. I'll do that. Yeah, Baseball Connection, you can follow us on Instagram. But, the Instagram page is cool. It's just there for if you want to see a little snippet of each episode. The actual episodes can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcasts, pretty much any podcast app you can find us on there. Even YouTube, you can find us on there. If you enjoy baseball, you'll find an episode there every single day. And just feel free to follow us, Baseball Connection.
Thank you to the listeners. This is going to be episode 30 in the books officially. Of course, you can find our show if you're not already subscribed, even though clearly you're listening. So you made it with us this far, but you're not subscribed. What are you doing? Find us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Google Play Store, all that good stuff. Come on, hit that subscribe button. Go to our Instagram page at Slumpbuster Podcast. Come for the memes. Stay for the podcast. We're going to be back next week. We're going to bring on another interesting guest. Never know. We've had a baseball pod, a hockey pod, a fighting pod. Who's going to be the next guest? We'll find out next week. Other than that, guys, peace out from your host, Juju Aundre. Have a good one.